Hopefully, folks will trickle in here as we go. All right, good morning, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tim Haight. I am the Chief of the Public Land Section here in the Bureau of Wildlife Habitat Management in Harrisburg for the Game Commission. So welcome to the training today. We're going to be talking about the iMapInvasives platform. And just a little background for you. Here in Harrisburg, we have a seat on the Governor's Invasive Species Council. And this iMapInvasives platform basically has been adopted by the Invasive Species Council as the clearinghouse going forward for invasive species data in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So this is something that we're looking to contribute to here into the future. I will say at this point, from the Game Commission standpoint, at this point it's going to be a voluntary thing at this point. So just as you're out there seeing invasive species, and there's certain things in each region that we want you to be on the lookout for, but just be aware, this is kind of a voluntary thing at this point. So glad to see there's a lot of interest out there in this effort. And folks willing to track invasive species locations out there. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You'll see that you're not going to be able to talk or unmute yourself. So any questions you have during the course of the training, please be sure to put them into the Q&A, and we'll look to get your answers to your questions at the end of the webinar. So. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Amy Jewett from the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. She's going to be giving us our introduction to iMapInvasives today. She's going to talk about the platform itself and then run us through a simple data collection example, from what I understand. So that will be good for us to see. So. We also encourage you, after this webinar to get in there and log into iMapInvasives, make a username for yourself, and log in and go in there and to play around with it as soon as you can after the webinar, just to kind of, try it out and make sure, you don't lose what you learned here today. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Amy. To take it away and give us our introduction to iMap.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Tim. Appreciate that great introduction. And welcome, everyone. So glad that you're here. Again, as Tim said, please make sure to use the Q&A as we go through the training, and type in your questions as we go, and we'll try to get to your questions at the end of the training. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So before we jump into iMapInvasives and the database, I wanted to just give a brief overview of invasive species. And I want to make sure we're all on the same page as far as what we mean by what an invasive species is. And so the general agreed upon definition of an invasive species is one that is non-native to a region, first and foremost. And secondly, it's known to cause harm in some way, whether that's to the environment, the economy, or human and animal health. And so those are the two key components to keep in mind. So if it doesn't fit into one of those categories, then it is not invasive. So it has to be non-native and known to cause harm. So I wanted to show this picture. It's a picture that I use in a lot of my trainings, and it's one that I think most of us would look at this scene and think, oh my goodness, how beautiful, such a gorgeous flowering plant here in this landscape, and think that it's, it belongs there. It's really nice to look at. This is actually a non-native invasive species. This is purple loosestrife that you see blooming here, and this is not supposed to be here. So this plant is actually causing harm to the environment. It is outcompeting the native plants and animals that would normally be living here. And over time, this will really disrupt the whole ecosystem that is happening and in place at this location. And so even though this is pleasing to the eye for many of us, it's important to realize that this is actually a plant that should not be here and is causing harm. And so this area would certainly warrant some kind of treatment or management of some sort. And so as the information on the slide here is saying, when there are no natural checks and balances in place for species that, did not evolve here, that is how these species get out of hand. And over time, they really start to cause a lot of harm. I also just want to mention quickly, sometimes we can confuse the term nuisance with invasive. So I just wanted to take a brief moment to talk about that as well. So some species can be considered a nuisance by us, but they're not technically invasive. So it's really important to make sure that we're not actually using that term for something that we just consider a nuisance. So an example of a nuisance species, I think for many of us, is poison ivy. So of course, I'm sure many of us have had experience with this plant where we brushed up against it and we ended up getting a rash from it later on. So that's not something that we enjoy. It's a nuisance to have it around. But it is, in fact, a native species, and it is actually a benefit to a lot of our wildlife. So, for example, when birds are getting ready for their migration season and they're trying to eat as much as they can to fatten up and really get ready for that, a lot of our bird species will actually eat the berries that are produced by poison ivy. And so it's actually a really great species to have in our natural environment. And certainly we want to keep our distance from it, for obvious reasons, but it's one that we don't actually want to manage per se, because it is native and it is a benefit to our wildlife. So that is just what I think we would term a nuisance species. Whereas a true invasive species, again, is one that is non-native to a region and known to cause harm in some way. And so I just wanted to make sure I differentiate between those two terms. So certainly there are many, many invasive species in Pennsylvania, unfortunately. Currently in iMapInvasives, we're tracking over 400 species. So I just wanted to go over just a few examples just to kind of set the stage for our talk today. So some common invasive species that I'm sure many of you have seen in your daily work duties with Game Commission are things like autumn olive, bush honeysuckle, and again, that purple loosestrife that I showed at the beginning. And then we have some other invaders that are not quite as common, but they are still present in the state. So we term these species high priority, ones that are about, they're in the state maybe like in a third of our counties or less. And so some examples of some high priority invasive species include Japanese angelica tree, black swallowwort, and creeping water primrose. And then finally, we also have some species that we call early detection, or ones that are not yet in Pennsylvania, but are known to be in surrounding states, or species that are newly arrived, that just got here and we don't yet know their full distribution very well. So some examples of the species that you see here on the slide, these are all not yet in Pennsylvania as far as we know. They include alligator weed, policeman's helmet, and Asian longhorn beetle. Okay, so now let's jump right into iMapInvasives. So this is a tool that I hope that Game Commission can start using as you're able to report the invasive species that you're finding in the game lands across Pennsylvania. So the various components, the main components of iMapInvasives are here on the slide, and I want to go through them briefly. So first and foremost, we use iMapInvasives as a way to better understand the distribution of species, and we do that by allowing people to collect data on invasive species that they are finding in places where they're working. And so it's fairly simple to do. As Tim mentioned, I'll be going through an example of how to collect data using one of our mobile apps, so you'll get a chance to see that later on. So not only do we allow this data collection component, but we also have a QC or quality control component to the program that happens on the backside and sort of is invisible to most people, but that is a really big part of what we do to make sure that any data that's being listed as confirmed in iMapInvasives is indeed being looked at, and we're making sure that that data is then trustworthy. So you can look at data in iMapInvasives and see that distribution via the presence information that's being tracked, but you can also look at data that we have available to see not detected or absence information. So for example, you looked for a species in a particular area and you didn't find it there. And actually that can actually be really valuable, especially for some of our high priority and early detection species. It's nice to know that someone looked in an area and didn't find it. So we actually do record that information in iMapInvasives, and we allow others to record that as well. And then finally, we do allow folks to record treatment data, or in other words, some kind of management, whether that's using some kind of chemical to manage the population of species, manually pooling something, or using a biocontrol. These are different examples of treatments. iMapInvasives also offers email alerts. So you can go in if you have a registered account and set up an alert that then would notify you when when a report came through for either a species of interest or an area that you are working in, and you'd like to know what's getting reported there. So that is something that is available to anyone who has a registered user account. And then finally, we do also offer the ability to not only put data into the system, but also pull it back out in the form of a data export. And you can do that by pulling data into an Excel spreadsheet, or if you use GIS, you can also pull that out in a geodatabase or a shapefile. So there's many different components to iMapInvasives. The data collection is only one piece of that. And I want to make sure that I'm trying to make that apparent here. So as I mentioned, we do have 2 mobile apps that we offer to our registered users to use for data collection while you're in the field. Both of these apps do not require an internet connection, so you can be literally in the middle of nowhere and still be able to use both of these apps. So the app that I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit later in the presentation is the basic iMapInvasives mobile app. We also offer an app that is used with Survey 123, which is an Esri product. And that app allows you to do a little bit more than what the basic app will do. It allows you to collect not only presence information, but also not detected and treatment. And it also allows you to collect points, lines, and polygons, whereas the basic mobile app is just presence or absence information and just points. So both have their pluses and minuses. So again, I'm going to show you guys the basic app. If you'd like to learn more about the Survey 123 app after today's training, there is information that's available online on the imapinvasives.org website. You can also feel free to reach out to me as well if you'd like to learn more about the Survey 123 app. So I also just want to mention briefly, it's very important that when you're collecting data with iMapInvasives, that you're including photographs to go along with your observations. And it's really important then to also be taking really good pictures. And that's really valuable as part of our quality control process that we have in place. We use those photos in order to actually confirm any records that come through. So the photo on the left side is an example of a good picture. This is purple loosestrife again, and we're fairly close up to that plant, and we're also making sure that that photo is fairly clear and crisp. We can see the features of that plant very well. Unfortunately, the middle photograph, this is mile a minute. This, even though we could use this photo to distinguish this species, it's not ideal because the plant is not in focus, it's fuzzy. And so we want to make sure that when we're taking photos, we slow down, we make sure that our camera is taking a good, clear and crisp picture of the, of the species that we're looking at. And then the photo on the right side, this is again purple loosestrife, but you can see we're really far away from that plant. We're taking that photo from a distance, and that is not ideal because we can't see up close the distinguishing characteristics of that species. So from this distance, that could potentially be a lookalike of purple loosestrife, and I just can't tell because it's too far away. So it's really important to make sure that we're getting within arm's reach or closer of the species that we're observing in order to take good pictures. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're taking photos of the species you're observing, you already have, or you do your homework and know what the distinguishing characteristics of that species are and take photos of those specific things, because that's what we really are going to hone in on when we do our quality control process. So these are photos taken of Tree of Heaven, and they each have distinguishing characteristics of that species in them. And that's what the photos are really honing in on. So the photo on the left is showing the leaflets of Tree of Heaven. And at the base of each of those leaflets is a small notch. That is a distinguishing and unique characteristic of this species that allows it to, that allows us to be able to identify that as Tree of Heaven. Another thing that's specific to this species, if you flip those leaflets over, on the underside is a small gland at the base of each of the leaflets, and that gives Tree of Heaven its bad reputation, not only for being an invasive species, but also it's very stinky. And so those glands actually give off that odor. So if you hone in on those glands, that's another distinguishing characteristic of that species. And then finally, the photo on the right is the photo of the bud scar for Tree of Heaven. So again, that's going to be unique to that species. But in addition, that photo is also capturing the appearance of the bark. And you'll notice that the bark resembles the skin of a cantaloupe. So that is yet another distinguishing characteristic that you want to hone in on. So again, this is just one example of one species that gives you some things to really make sure you're keeping in mind. If you're looking at other species that are in your area, make sure that you know what those distinguishing characteristics are and make sure you're honing in on those specific things when you're taking pictures. Okay, so now let's jump right into iMapInvasives. Again, there's lots of different tools and functionality that this platform offers, so I want to make sure that we get through all of that here today. So when you want to go ahead and log in or register for an account, if you don't already have one, you'll need to go to iMapInvasives.org. That's our program's website. And you'll notice in the header of that website, there's a login button or a register button. So if you click on either one of those, that will take you to a page that looks like this here on the right side of this slide. You'll see there's a login area at the top where you can go ahead and enter your existing credentials, or if you don't already have an account, you'll want to go ahead and fill in that sign up form. And I just want to make sure that I mention it's important that everyone has their own individual accounts. Generally, we do not create group accounts, and we don't encourage people to share their iMapInvasives account with other folks. It's really important that if your account is being used, it's only being used by you. And this is for purposes of knowing who is creating records so that if we have a question, we know who to reach back out to. So again, it's really important to make sure that you are registering for your own unique account. Okay, so when you do log into iMapInvasives, this is the screen that you will see. And I want to go over the different parts and tools that you see here on this screen. We'll do that one by one. So starting on the left, in the upper left corner, you see a green leaf and 3 horizontal lines. That is our main menu. And if you click on that, you'll see a drop down show up with different things that you can click on. So the first thing in that list is our jurisdiction species list. So that is a way for you to see all the species that we are currently tracking in iMapInvasives here in Pennsylvania. Again, as I mentioned, we're tracking over 400 species. So you can see that just by clicking on the jurisdiction species list. Next is the network species list. So this is the list of species that are being tracked in all the different states and provinces that are participating in the iMapInvasives program. And so we do have several other states, New York being one of the closest ones, and we do have several Canadian provinces that are also participating in the program as well. So it's not just Pennsylvania. Then we have an area called projects. So this is an area where you can essentially create what we call project to categorize your data and easily be able to query for it later on. You don't have to tag your data to a project if you don't want to, but if you want to easily kind of combine your data and have it be separate from all the other data that's in the platform, you can go ahead and create a project. And that's something that any registered user can do. You don't need me or another administrator to do that for you. So you could, for example, set up a project for data found in a particular state game land. And then that would be a project that you could easily query for in one of the tools that I'll show you guys a little bit later on. Okay, so there's also an organizations tab, and this is where you can actually affiliate your IMAP account with your organization, which would be the Pennsylvania Game Commission. So in order to do that, if you type in a Game Commission in the search organizations box, when that comes up, you click on it, and then you'll bring up the Pennsylvania Game Commission organization profile page. And in the upper right area, you'll notice where it says request to join organization. You'll want to click on that, and that will then send a request to me to approve you to be part of that organization. So just make sure that you do make sure to affiliate your account with PGC after you request a login account. And then finally, there is a tab called Your Account. So this profile is specific to you, so you can go ahead and fill in any information in here that may be missing, but it does have your email address, your state that you're affiliated with, and then any projects or organizations that you are a member of. There's also an email alerts tab. So again, I mentioned that any registered user can sign up for an email alert, and this is a way that you can stay notified about species that are of interest to you. For example, maybe a high priority or early detection species, or to stay informed of species that are being reported in areas that are relevant to you, maybe a region or just a particular game land, for example. So these are completely customizable. You can make an alert be tailored to specifically what you need it to be, and then you can activate it or deactivate it as you choose. Okay, and here's just an example of an email alert. So again, as I mentioned, you can really customize these alerts to be specific to your needs. So there is an option in the email alerts to choose a radius from point. So you could choose a specific point on the map and then draw a radius around that, and then everything within that radius you will be notified about. And so these are just some species as an example to show what would be found in this particular area. Okay, so then as we keep going down there on that left-hand side, there's a little icon that looks like a house. So if you click on that, that will take you back to this current extent of the map that you see. This is the default map view. So if you've been zooming around or going to different locations on the map, clicking on that little home icon will bring you back out to this main map view. There's also a little button that looks like crosshairs. If you click on that, that will zoom to your current location, or it might be slightly off, so maybe kind of close to where you are. But if you want to, see data that's in your area, you can easily do that just by clicking on that little crosshairs button. And then we also have a search bar that you can enter an address, a place name, or GPS coordinates, and the map again will just zoom to that location. So for example, you could use that search bar to type in the name of a state game land, and the way that would, it's sort of specific the way that you'd have to type it in. So you would type in state game lands number NO 314 as an example, and then the map will zoom directly to that particular state game land. So you can zoom if you want to, or you can use the search bar, and that will take you right to that location as well. Okay, then moving over to the buttons on the upper part of the map screen. Starting on the left is a button that says Create Record. So you can use the online database to actually create a record, or as I mentioned, I'll be showing a demo a little bit later on, you can use one of our mobile apps to create information as well. But here you can just click on Create Record, and that will give you the option to create a presence, treatment, or a not detected record. Then we have a tool that's called Go To Record, and this is a way that you can easily look up a particular record, whether that's presence, treatment, or not detected, if you know the record's ID number. Okay, and then we have a tool that's called Filter Records. So this is a really, really important tool. I want to make sure you guys remember this. So again, putting data in is one part of IMAP, but pulling the data back out and looking at what is of most interest to you, that is the capability that the filter records tool offers you. So you can filter based on almost any criteria that you can think of, whether that is a species name, you can query on data that you found or someone else found. You can query by date. So maybe you're only interested in data that's fairly recent. So you can use the records after and records before area to type in a date. If you want to only look up data that's found by other members of the Game Commission, you can use that organization area. And you can combine any of these fields as well. So you're not limited to just one thing. So for example, you could look for autumn olive found by members of the Game Commission. That could be a query that you run. There's different tabs at the top that you can query on. We're just on the general tab, but there's also other tabs that also offer additional filtering capabilities. So again, here's just an example of what the filter tab could do. So this example, we're looking at data found for autumn olive just in Pennsylvania. And we can see that information then pop up on the screen here in the form of those orange hexagons and the blue triangles, which I'm going to be showing you a little bit later how to interpret that. Here's another example of data that is just for water chestnut in Pennsylvania. Again, you can see there's orange hexagons and the blue triangles show up on the map, indicating the distribution of that species. The next button on the top is called Identify Measure. And so the purpose of this tool actually has two different functions. So the Identify part of this tool allows you to get a sense of what data is being shown on the map in a particular area when you're zoomed in. And I'll show you that here in a minute. And the distance button allows you to quickly measure the distance from one location to another. Google Maps offers this capability. We also offer it in iMapInvasives as well. And it might be, helpful just to have a quick tool to say, I want to know how far this point is from this point. And all you do then is use that measure tool to click on the map, and you can easily then see that information in whatever form you want, whether that's meters or miles or kilometers or feet, whatever is relevant to you. But I want to show you an example of how to use the Identify tool. So if you click on that Identify Measure, and then there's a little box that shows up at the bottom of the screen. If you click on Area, that will then allow you to draw a polygon around an area of interest. And then if you click on the See What's Here, a table will pop up, and that will give you information on all the species that are found within that polygon that you drew on the map. So all those points on the map, it's giving you that information to quickly know what was found there. And so there's two tabs in that table, one for confirmed and one for approximate. Both are essentially confirmed information. The approximate data can sometimes not have specific GPS coordinates. Maybe it's sort of approximate to an area, but not, the map's point isn't exact. And also in the lower right corner, you can get a quick sense of how many records are in that polygon. We can see there's a total of 22 data points. Okay, as I mentioned, there's also the ability to export information. So you would want to filter the map for only the data that you're interested in, and then use that export button to pull out that information in the form of an Excel file, a geodatabase, or a shapefile. We also offer the ability to run what we call reports in IMAP. And this is just another way to essentially analyze the data in IMAP in a way that is relevant to you. So an example of one of the 4 types of reports that we offer is called Species List by Geography. And that's probably the one that I use the most. And so that's the one that I'm going to show an example of. So for example, if we choose the Species List by Geography report, you can choose, for example, a county that you're interested in, and you can find out all the species that have been reported in a particular county. You can also use that report option to view all the species that have been found in a particular game land. if that's relevant for you, which hopefully that would be helpful for many of you. You can also use our municipal boundary layer to choose a particular municipal area and then even draw a buffer outside of that. So this example is a 5-mile buffer outside of a particular area, and all of the species that are in that buffer you can then learn about. So again, these are just a few examples of the types of information that you can get by running a report. In this case, a species list by geography report. And then once you do run that report, here's an example of what that would look like. So we can see it gives you the species name, both the scientific and the common. It's also giving you a list of all the confirmed and approximate data points, and then the total number of species for within that query that you just ran. Okay, so then going over on the far right side of our screen, we'll start out with the base map. So you can change the maps here in the screen to your liking. Sometimes certain data points will show up better on a lighter screen versus a darker screen and vice versa. So you have the ability to choose different base maps. So I'm just going to go through and show you some of the different base maps that we offer. So again, here's sort of a lighter map that you can choose and a darker one. So you can play with that and you can use whichever ones that you like. We also have this option called Add Layer from URL. And this is essentially a way to pull in an external web map service to look at iMapInvasives data in combination with this public map layer. So an example of a public map layer that you could pull in are the state game lands. This is available from PASDA, the PA Spatial Data Access. I don't even know how many public map layers there are that are out there, but there's a lot. But this is probably the one that's most relevant for most people here on the call today. So you can pull this map layer in and then start turning iMapInvasives data on and off to be able to see that in relation with the game lands. Excuse me. So then we also have a section called Add Distribution Layer. And this is going to allow you to view filtered data by a custom geography that we have embedded into iMapInvasives. So I'm going to show you some examples of what that would look like. So here we can see we have a view of where Tree of Heaven is located in Pennsylvania based on counties. So we can see those counties that are highlighted, and that's where Tree of Heaven has been reported at so far. We also have the ability to view data by our conservation lands area, our map layer, there on the left-hand side. And then also we have a municipalities map layer that you can look at it, the data that way. So essentially, this is all data for Tree of Heaven. You're just looking at it in different ways. So here's the county distribution again, and then there's the distribution by the conservation lands and the municipalities. Then we also have a section called Layers On Off. So this is where you can turn on or off the data that is most relevant to you. So we have our confirmed data layer. This is all the data that's been reported to IMAP and gone through that quality check process. So that's why it's called confirmed. There's also unconfirmed data that you can turn on. So if you just recently submitted a data point and it hasn't been checked yet by an expert, it's going to come up and show up as unconfirmed. So you can still see your data whether or not it's been confirmed. We also have the approximate data as well. Again, that's also confirmed data. It just isn't exact. So maybe something was found within a water body. Maybe something was found, it was maybe mismapped. Sometimes we get data points that are mapped in the middle of a roadway, and that's just because someone's GPS was slightly off. And so we'll mark that data as approximate because we recognize that, a Tree of Heaven probably wasn't growing in the middle of a road. At least I hope not. We also have not detected data that you can turn on. Again, that's that absence information where you looked for a species but didn't find it. And then we also have treatments, again, that management, you're doing management of a species somewhere. Okay, so here's just an example of some data. So I use the filter records tool to run a particular query. And I'm using that layers on off now to look at both the confirmed and the approximate information. And as you can see, we have our game lands layer added to the map. So we can now see the confirmed information that's within some of these state game lands. And if I remember correctly, I think this is data for autumn olive. We also, might come up as sort of hard to see on your screen, but we also recently incorporated an embedded map layer that is sourced from iNaturalist. And for those of you that may not be familiar with iNaturalist, this is another online platform that's used to collect data on any species, whether it's invasive or native. As long as it's living, it can be recorded in iNaturalist, essentially. And so because there is a large amount of data on invasive species that is coming from iNaturalist, we thought it'd be really valuable to be able to incorporate that as its own separate layer in iMapInvasives that you can turn on and off as you like for a specific species. So you would use your filter records tool to query the map and then turn that on. Again, showing some of the tools that are available. We do have multiple map layers that you can turn on and off to look at the data and kind of better understand it. So for example, we have a states and provinces map layer. So you can see, specifically where that data is within a particular state or province. And then we have our counties layer. So you can turn that on and off to get a good sense of where data is being found within a particular county. We also have a water bodies map layer. We have our conservation lands layer, and the game lands are included in this, but there's also other things as well. So that's why I wanted to show you that you can actually incorporate a layer just for state game lands using the external web map tool that I showed earlier. Then we have our regional management partnerships, also known as cooperative weed management areas in Pennsylvania, CWMAs. We do have 5 of them. Most of them are located in the north part of our state. We also have in the south, the Southern Laurel Highlands invasive plant management area as well. So you can turn that map layer on and off too, as that is relevant to you. We have our hydro basins layer. So this is primarily going to be used in reference to aquatic species probably, but it could be used for terrestrials too, depending on your purposes. And then we have a local municipalities or local municipal boundaries layer as well. Okay, and then finally we have our legend, because there's lots of things going on here when we're turning on and off data. And so we want to make sure we can understand what that data is representing. And so the legend is going to be able to show you that information. So as you're zooming in on the map, the orange hexagons, which you see here at kind of the really zoomed out level, that map will change as you zoom in and the data points actually become clear and you can start to see them and what they represent. The legend is going to be your indicator of what data is what exactly. Okay, so now we're going to jump to a demonstration of using the mobile app. So give me a second here to pull that up. All right. All right, so just give me a moment here. Oops. Okay, sorry for the wait. Hold on one moment. Okay. Now I'm gonna try to move this. Might have to stop sharing my screen and do a reshare. So hold on a moment here. Okay. All right, Tim or Scott, can you confirm that you can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Looks like a phone on your
Fantastic.
desktop.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that showed up. Okay. All right. So a little bit of a lag here. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to use the iMapInvasives mobile app. Again, this is our basic app. We have the Survey 123 app as well that gives you some more advanced data collection fields that you can use. But this is our basic app and allows you to collect presence and absence information fairly easily and fairly quickly. So this is something you can get from wherever you get your apps. You can just download the iMapInvasives mobile app to your device. When you open up the app for the first time, this is what it looks like. So it's going to give you just a very quick synopsis of the different tools and where to go to do different things. So if I tap on my phone, then that's going to disappear. And then we can start to actually use the app. So it looks like, again, there's a little bit of a lag here. So hopefully that will catch up with me. Okay, so for the delay here, it's just taking a little bit of time. Okay, oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, it's just taking a little bit of time here. So if I click on the menu in the upper left corner, and it's going to give me the option to set my preferences, and I'm just going to wait for this to catch up to me because I have it on my phone, but it's not showing up yet on here. So just hopefully that'll come up here shortly. There we go. There's the menu, and we would click on preferences. Perfect. Okay, so some of this is already filled in on my screen, but this will be blank for you if you're filling it in for the first time. So you're going to want to choose Pennsylvania as your jurisdiction. And then you're going to want to enter your iMapInvasives. Apologies here, it's catching up with me. You're going to want to enter your iMapInvasives username, which would be your email address that you use to sign up with your account, and your password as well. If you don't already have an account, you'll want to make sure that you go ahead and create one prior to actually setting up and using this mobile app. A button called Retrieve IMAP List. So you'll want to make sure to click on that. And essentially that is pulling in all of the information from iMapInvasives, including our most up-to-date track species list, your account profile, and any projects that you're associated with, as well as any of your affiliated organizations. So once you click on that, it will pull that information into your mobile app. Then you have the option to display the species drop-down list in the app, whether you scientific or common or both. So right now I have it set to both, but you can customize that list however you want that to be. So you could just choose one or the other, it's just scientific or common, or you can select both like I have here. Then there's an option to create a custom species list. This is essentially a way to say, I know I'm only going to be surveying for, 5 species, for example. And so you would customize your species list to only be those 5 species. And then only those 5 species would show up when you're actually collecting data with the app. If you don't use a custom species list, it will have all of our species. So again, we track over 400, so there's a lot. So it's a way to kind of shorten that list and make it a little bit less to have to scroll through, essentially. And you'll see that here in a moment, go through and actually, collect the data and show you that. Again, it's catching up with me. Apologies for the delay on this end. So hopefully you guys are following along okay. Then there's also the picture quality that you can set. So that's set to 50%. That's fine. You do have the option to save your photos that you take to your device's photo library if you want to do that. And then there also is the default base map type, whether that's road or satellite aerial imagery. So you can choose that as well. There's some other things down here on the bottom that you can customize. Again, sorry for the delay. It's just taken a little bit to show up on the screen. There's a measurement system that you can choose how you want that to show up, whether that is a US customary or metric. So most of us probably choose the US. And then if you're tagging any data to your project or a project that you may have set up, this is where you could choose that default project at within your preferences. And then also your default organization is at the very bottom. And so that should be set to Pennsylvania Game Commission. Again, apologies for the delay here. It's just taken a little bit to show up. So once you set your preferences, and again, that's really important to make sure that you're doing that first prior to actually creating any data records. So you'll want to make sure that you save everything. And that will then bring you back out to the main app home screen. And I'm just gonna hopefully wait here just a little bit, and that should show up here shortly. So sorry about the delay. This usually is a little bit faster, so it must feel like it's a Monday. All right, I think it's finally catching up with me. All right, so I'm just gonna keep talking and hopefully that'll start showing up for you guys on your end. So when you're on the main app screen in the upper right corner, you'll go ahead and click on Add Observation. And that will then bring up a screen where you can take a photo of the species that you are looking at. And you can choose to do that with your camera, or if you've already taken an image of that plant, like a minute ago and it's saved in your device's library, you can check to choose to select that photo from your device's library. So I'm going to do that on my end. I saved some photos already. And with the app, it only allows you to capture one photo per record. So you want to make sure that's a really good photo. Again, keeping in mind a species distinguishing characteristics. And then there's a species list, so you can choose what species it was that you looked at. So I have a picture of autumn olive, so I'm going to choose autumn olive from my species list. Again, I apologize that it's taken a little bit longer to show up on your guys' end. So hopefully you're following along with me as best you can. Then it also gives you the option to choose whether you detected a species. So for a presence finding, or if you didn't detect it, it would be absence. So I'm going to go ahead and choose species detected. It will fill in the observation date for you. So that part of it is automatic. And then your GPS that's integrated into your device will, will capture your location. So you won't need to do that part. And then it also, again, will give you the option to choose whether you want to tag your information to a project. So you can do that, or you don't have to. It all depends on what you want to do. So your affiliated organization should pop up here, again, based on what you filled in your preferences. It's going to give you a field asking for the time that you searched for that species. So maybe you just did a quick search, so it was maybe just a minute of your time. It's going to ask for the size of the area that is containing that invasive species. So the options include up to 10 square feet, up to half an acre, up to an acre, or more than an acre. So you can choose what is most relevant there. And it's going to ask for the distribution of that species. So the options are trace, sparse, dense, monoculture, or linearly scattered. So I'm going to go ahead and choose one of these options. There is also a observation comments field at the very bottom that you can fill in any other information that may be relevant to your finding. And so then if you click on save for that, that will then save that record to your iMapInvasives mobile app. And wow, I feel really bad. This is just taking a long time, so I'm sure it's hard for you guys to keep up and follow along. I may have to do a recorded video and send this out for you guys afterwards so you can get everything. So apologies. I'm going to keep talking through this again. Hopefully you can follow along as best you can. So it's going to show your record that you just saved on the home screen of your app. And so if you go ahead and click on that record, and then up in your main menu, you will go ahead and say upload. And it's going to ask you, are you ready to upload your record? And you're going to say, okay. And that record will then upload directly into the iMapInvasives database. And it will disappear from your mobile app screen. Okay, let me see here. Maybe I can get this to show up again. I'm so sorry. This usually isn't as such of a delay as it's having here today. So I apologize. All right. Let's see here. All right, good. It sort of caught up with me. I will definitely, Scott and Tim, I will do a recorded video of that and send that out a little bit later so you guys have a better sense of how this just works. So
No,
apologies if that didn't work quite as well as I had hoped it would.
not at all. No problem, Amy.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So again, you guys hopefully were able to follow along as best you could on that. I'll be sending out more information a little bit later on. I do have a few more slides that I want to share with you guys before wrapping up. So let me start sharing my screen on the right side. Okay. All right. Can you guys see my slideshow again?
Yeah. We
Okay,
gotcha.
fantastic. Thank you. All right. So I just want to wrap up by giving you guys some next steps for how you can get involved with iMapInvasives. And as Tim mentioned at the beginning of today's training, I think it's going to be really valuable that, as soon as you can after today's training, log in, request a login account, get in there and kind of play around with it and use the app and record a data point or two and just, try to cement in this information in your mind as much as you can, because very often if you don't use it, you lose it shortly afterwards. And so it's going to be really valuable to get in here as soon as you can and just kind of play with it and sort of learn things a little bit more. So one of the first things that you can do is to go into the regions where you work and do some queries for invasive species that are found in your area. Use that filter records tool that's available to query for particular species that are found there, or look at everything. Zoom into an area and just use that identify tool to see what species are being found in a particular area. Go ahead and set up an email alert. Stay notified of what is being reported that is of most interest to you. Again, if that's a particular species that's being found across the state, go ahead and set up an alert for that. Or if you're only interested in maybe a specific geographic area, you can set up an alert for that as well. Again, I'm going to send out more information because my demo didn't go as well as I had hoped it would today. So I'll send out a recorded video of how to use the mobile app so you guys can get a better sense of how to do that. But go ahead, download that app and record some data with it while you're out in the field. Again, you don't need an internet connection to use the app. You just need to get that the app downloaded onto your device. Again, you'll need a connection for that part. But to actually use it and collect data, you do not need an internet connection. I will mention that in order to actually upload the data from your device to the platform, you will need to be connected to the internet for that part. But to actually capture the information, you don't need to be connected. Also, as I mentioned, there is a lot of invasive species out there, unfortunately, but the DCNR has put together a whole lot of really great fact sheets on various invasive species. And I want to say they have right around 100. So there's a lot of information that they offer, and that is available on their website. So go to DCNR's website, check out their fact sheets. There is also information that's available specifically on the iMapInvasives, the PA iMapInvasives website. And also there's some great field guides that are available online as well. And they're pictured here on this slide. It's the plant invaders of mid-Atlantic natural areas, which is primarily terrestrial species. And then the Pennsylvania's Field Guide to Aquatic Invasive Species is available as well. That was created by Pennsylvania Sea Grant. So I just encourage you to get more familiar with some of these species. And again, that will then be valuable in informing how you take your photos of the species that you are looking at. That will give you the tools you need to know what are those distinguishing characteristics that you need to be honing in on. There's also an event that our program, the iMapInvasives program, will be hosting this year. It's a special survey event that we're encouraging folks to be looking for spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven, which tree of heaven is the favored host plant of spotted lanternfly. And so we really want to encourage more people to be searching for spotted lanternfly because this is such a highly regulated pest in our state. And so there's multiple counties, many in the north part of the state, that spotted lanternfly has not been found at yet. And so we want to encourage more people to be searching in these early detection areas to make sure that we really are getting, being proactive in our searches and finding it sooner rather than later. And so we've set up a special online map where folks can actually claim a 1 kilometer area that they then survey in. And you can claim multiple areas if you'd like to. And then throughout the summer and the fall, you can go to these areas. We're going to ask folks to go there about 3 times and search for both species and record your findings in iMapInvasives, both presence and absence information. So there'll be a webinar that I'll be doing coming up here really soon on Thursday, June 2nd. And that's open to anyone who is interested and would like to sign up. So there is the link here in the PowerPoint, which I'll be sending a copy of that out to folks. So you can register right from the PowerPoint, or you can go to the PA-imapinvasives.org website, and on our events page is a registration area that you can sign up for this. And then finally, I wanted to mention that we put together some lists of suggested species that you guys can look for in the regions where you work. And so many of these species that I'll show you are commonly found, so you can pretty much expect to find them in these areas. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of great resources online, including DCNR and also Penn State Extension, that offers really helpful information on how to identify some of these species if you're not already familiar with them. So for the Northwest, here is the list of species. So tree of heaven, poison hemlock, glassy buckthorn are just some of them. Here is the list for the Southwest region. You'll notice that some of these species are duplicated in each of the regions because they are priority species that we want to make sure that folks are looking for and reporting. Here is the list for the North Central region. Again, we have some similar species on here. Goat's rue is one that is a high priority species, not commonly found in much of the state, but it is found in the North Central region. Here's the list for the South Central region. You'll notice kudzu is on here. I think a lot of times we think of that species as just being a southern species, but we do actually have populations of kudzu in Pennsylvania, and that's one that we definitely want to get a handle on before it starts spreading. So that one is here on this particular list. Here's the list for the Northeast region. Again, some of these species you saw on some of the other previous regions lists. And then finally, we have the Southeast region as well. So Tim and Scott will be sending out these lists via email. So if you didn't memorize them here in the few seconds that I gave you, that's totally fine. You'll be getting that later on to reference. So again, this is a kind of a place to start as far as what species to be looking for, what species to start getting more familiar with, and then again, what species we would encourage you to be reporting to iMapInvasives as you are able to. Okay, so just as a quick wrap up, so giving you some final thoughts here on iMapInvasives. So again, there's many practical applications for using this platform if you're someone that works in the natural resources field or land management. Many people, many groups, agencies, and organizations are already using iMapInvasives to document their invasive species findings as well as their treatment efforts. And when you are working for such a big organization like the Game Commission, as well as many other agencies that we have here in our state, storing this information for invasive species findings in one central location is really helpful and really valuable because you're not going in multiple directions trying to find this information. It's being cataloged all in one area that's available to everyone because this is a publicly available database. And so it's really valuable to have it kind of consolidated and put all together. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. Again, sorry for some of the hiccups with the demonstration, but hopefully that was really valuable for most of you, and happy to answer any questions that folks might have at this time. So Tim, if you don't mind coordinating the Q&A questions at this time, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, thanks, Amy. Appreciate you doing the presentation here for us. And certainly informative for me. Hopefully it's informative to our staff here in the field. And as Amy said, we'll be sending out the recording and some other follow-up information in the next day or so here, hopefully, to get that information out to you. I did not see any questions come into the chat, and the Q&A. So one question has come in, and that asks if the app was created in-house or by a contractor.
So the basic app, the one that I did my demo on, that was actually created in-house by one of my New York iMapInvasives colleagues. And so that is actually managed by the iMapInvasives program. The Survey 123 is not an app that belongs to us. That's actually one that was created by Esri, which does all the GIS applications. But what we did do for the Survey 123 app is the iMapInvasives program created a special form that includes iMapInvasives data collection fields. And that form is what you actually integrate into the Survey 123 app. And that's how you're able to use that app to collect data specifically for iMapInvasives. So as I mentioned before, there is information on the iMapInvasives.org web specifically about the mobile apps. I'm happy to share more information out as well if folks want to learn more about that and have trouble finding the resources. So really valuable tools. Again, that's how a lot of our users are collecting data, especially when they're in the field, is through the use of these mobile apps. So I would certainly encourage use of them as much as possible.
Okay, thanks. I had one more question come in via the chat, and this is more on our end, it looks like, asking if the Survey 123 will be available to our staff to be downloadable at some point. That's something we can certainly work on finding a solution to. So right now, if you can get the basic application in the Commonwealth catalog, so you can at least get that at this point. If anybody else has any other questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A.
Okay, so it looks like there's a question that came through about how to add the PGC map layer again. So the way that you do that, if you go to PASDA, P-A-S-D-A, online, there's a way that you can look up the Game Commission layer and then integrate that into the tool that I showed. I know I'm not explaining that very much in depth. So what I can do is I will send out specific instructions to Tim and Scott, and that can be forwarded on to others on how to do that, because it wasn't exactly obvious for me when I was doing it, so I'm sure it wouldn't be obvious for everyone too, but I'll be happy to share that information out. Okay, and it looks like there is someone else that added about more information about the Survey 123 app. So I can go ahead and also share that out as well to Tim and Scott, and that can be forwarded on to the group.
That would be great. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, sure thing. And I don't know if we mentioned or not, but I do plan to save my PowerPoint as a PDF, and then that will also be shared with everyone so you can reference what we talked about today. And if anyone has any questions after today's training, my email address was here in the PowerPoint, and I can put it here in the chat as well. And folks can feel free to reach out to me at any time with any questions that you may have.
All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I just want to thank Amy for presenting to the group here today. Certainly feel free to contact Amy or myself or Tim if you have any questions, and we'll be sure to provide you all additional information packaged up, I would say in the next week or so.
Yeah, and I'll get this stuff to you guys as soon as I can, Scott, and I'll be sending out the recording for this as well as soon as I can.
Yeah, and for internal purposes, so everybody knows, we'll package all this up and share it on the H drive somewhere so everybody can see it. All right. Thank you so much, Amy. Really do appreciate your time. Thanks everybody for joining. And please do get your nose into iMapInvasives.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Amy.